we could. There's no need to cry. I think we tried it all. And then, yeah, so let's say our goodbye. Once again, they said our goodbye.
Like I said, that was my good friend Bobby Hinton, and known him for a number of years. Great blues artist that lives right here in the Durham, North Carolina community. So definitely a good friend and somebody that I'm glad to call somebody that I've known his musical career for a while. So just a truly amazing artist and a truly amazing individual. So definitely might bring on some more blues music or some more sounds later on during the course of this particular show. So we're just keeping things rolling along, having a great conversation. Of course, we're going to see who else decides to join us or to make comments or things that they might want to comment on as well. We know that one of the things that's happening, unfortunately, with what's going on in the world is that, unfortunately, there is the whole concept of a lot of businesses that are closing down because of the pandemic and the way that it is impacting them. I know that I've seen that Nearly New Shop, which is a very popular thrift shop right here in Durham, North Carolina, that they closed recently, and that really was sad when I saw that. I walked by there and noticed that they had closed their doors totally. I mean, they had pretty much just everything that was in the building, and that was a very popular thrift store. They used to have books and clothes and various household supplies and just all kinds of amazing things like that. And they had closed down and are no longer around. And I'm hearing from folks in the community that they're not even sure that they will be coming back at all. So we do know that that has impacted a number of folks with things along that line. So definitely a lot of businesses are closing down throughout the country and throughout the world. So that's just a thing that's going on, unfortunately. So I see that my good buddy and partner in crime, Shaquille, has joined me. So I was just talking to the listeners and talking to them about the fact that businesses are closing down here. We just lost Morgan Import, which is a popular store here in Durham, and then there's a thrift store near me that's closed. And I was just seeing that a drugstore that's in Chapel Hill, where UNC is at, is trying to make it to 100 years. So it's just we're seeing the economical impact of stores here in the United States. But are y'all seeing that in Australia too? Or a number of your more popular stores closing down, and the other parts of the world that you're part of?
Yeah, I think Australia is called the lucky country, and we've managed to weather quite a few storms reasonably well. The Great Recession, we didn't really feel it too much, and with the coronavirus, of course there has been some downturn, and there have been some people struggling, but I think for the most part we're weathering this one actually pretty well. The government had a program called the JobKeeper allowance, so that was it was like receiving Social Security, and I actually don't know exactly how much it was or how much it is, but I think it's around $1,500 a fortnight, and that's to help people that have lost their jobs or unable to work, to keep them employed. There's a lot of grants and things like that being given to small businesses just to keep them going. Yeah, I think we're weathering it pretty well. There are some industries that are really hurting, like the hospitality industry and stuff like that. Restaurants and tourist places, of course, are really struggling. But whilst we've had an effect, I don't think it's been quite as bad as perhaps it is elsewhere, such as the US and in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Because I know one of the things that has shocked me is I've got a friend that's in that one of those travel businesses. So it's like one of those multi-level marketing plans where they do travel, kind of like it's not vacation, it's another one like that. But they've been talking to their folks and have been shockingly been told that folks are actually buying airplane tickets and cruises. So I guess they're getting those discount deals, and that's why in their mind they're thinking that industry is up. I don't know what you're seeing on the market, but they're actually thinking that industry is up because they're being told that folks are actually doing like reservations and doing things. And I know a lot of those companies, whether it's the planes or whether it's the cruises, are offering like some truly amazing discounts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I've seen a lot of things come through my inbox, and I've gone, oh, wow, that looks really good. but we've had a big thing here in Australia that there's sort of been on the news. We've got a couple of big travel agents, and some of them weren't refunding the tickets, although the airline was offering refunds on tickets. And we've actually had one of our biggest travel agents, a company called STA Travel, that actually just filed for bankruptcy. And that's a problem because a lot of the people that work in the travel industry, they're franchise owners and things like that. So with the franchise struggles and then the master company struggles, it's a problem, and then people lose a bit of money. But I'm I guess fortunate enough that if I lose $500 that someone else has lost their job, I'm kind of like I got off pretty lightly. Look, it's an interesting scenario. I, as some of your viewers may know from other shows, I was actually in the United States when COVID sort of really broke out, and I had to fly back to Australia. My original return ticket brought me via Japan. I didn't want to take 3 trips to get home. I wanted to take a direct flight, so I flew straight from LA to Sydney. It's the first time I've actually taken that direct flight. So normally I like to pop into quite a few different countries on the way home.
Right.
But that left me, of course, with my return ticket that's still sitting there. So I'm going to have to come back to the US at some point in order to take that return ticket. And the travel agent said to me, you can have your ticket refunded, but because you've flown one leg of it, you're not going to get refunded 50% of what you paid. You're only going to get refunded, like a portion of it, because that's sort of how the airline industry works. So I've basically just got these tickets with no expiry date on them that have to be used at some point in the future, because there's no point me getting them refunded. I think a lot of people are kind of in that situation where they're kind of stuck, But we're very fortunate.
Yeah, because I know that a friend of mine does a show not on our network but on another network, and they've got some folks that are stuck in like Mexico and other places because they were in those places when the COVID pandemic struck. So they were just kind of like stuck there. And I think in some cases they may be home, but in other cases they're still in the other country that they were stuck at, and they're still trying to work their way back to their homeland, whatever that homeland might be. So definitely, I've got to tell you one other thing, Shaquille, other than the thing about the whole thing with travel. See, I'm sometimes jealous of you, Shaquille, because I've seen your pictures and I've seen them on like social media. So I know that you've got like a boat, so you get to travel on a boat. And I'm like, I've always wanted that lifestyle. So I've got to figure out how you did that. And of course, I'm much older, like in the late 50s, and you're in your 30s. So I probably missed that boat literally for having my own boat.
Actually, that's not my that's not mine. But yeah, I had a bit of a chance to sail it around. We were actually in Tahiti and from French Polynesia, so we got around Tahiti and Bora Bora and all those places. And I said to the captain, I said, "Oh, can I have a go?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." And she goes, "Just look straight at the horizon." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, how hard could this be?" And I kept calling her. I was like, "Am I going correctly?" And she's like, "No, but it will do for now." And I was like, way off course. So just don't trust me to sail anything. That's the first bit of advice I can give you. But no, it was a lovely trip over there, and I certainly do enjoy being on the water. Look, I love traveling. I've got itchy feet, so I love traveling and just exploring different cultures and different countries. And I think you learn a lot as well. And you just see so many things. And then the thing is, no matter where in the world you go, there's a commonality between all of us. We all love our families and our kids, and our brothers and sisters. Like, we all want to improve our lives and all that sort of stuff. So there's a real commonality, and no matter where you go in the world, you'll see that.
No, I've noticed that as well, that commonality. I had not, like I said, my only trip onto the ocean, well, we can't really count when I was a baby, because I went to Turkey when my dad was in the Air Force, and I was literally an infant. But other than that, I went on a cruise as about a year and a half ago, and that was my first cruise, and I really enjoyed the cruise. Of course, I saw all that big, massive amount of water, and I'm sitting there going like, all right, as long as I don't fall in that, we're good. So that's my only concern, is that whole concept of falling into the water, because I don't swim. And I know that they say they got the lifeboats and all of that other stuff, but I just think that if I get into the water, I'm pretty much done, because if the water don't get me, the sharks or something else will get me. So, but you're over there in Australia, and y'all are right. The whole country, it looks like, is pretty much covered by water or near water. So that when you look at it on the map, it's like, is there a part of Australia that's more like that far away from the ocean, or is pretty much everything within an hour or two of the ocean?
If you live here, you're generally going to live around the coastal areas. There are parts of Australia, like most of Australia, is actually just desert. Like you don't want to go there. And I've been through the centre of Australia, so you guys might know about Ayers Rock. It's sort of a big landmark. I hazard to say that most Australians have never gone there and probably will never go there because it's kind of out of the way to get to. So I've met a lot of tourists that have been there, and I'm like, I should really kind of go there, I suppose. If I've been to all these other parts of the world, I should really go and see this. And I had a great time while I was there, but not a lot of water around those areas. And there's a lot of water shortages, obviously, in the desert areas of Australia because most of our country really is a desert. But yeah, for the most part, where most people live, you're pretty close to water, which is great, and I miss it in a way that I didn't think I would. So when I went across to Switzerland, I was traveling a lot between Zurich and Liechtenstein, which is a very small country that's sort of sandwiched between Germany and Austria and Switzerland. And I didn't really think I'd miss the beach or miss the thing because it was like, I'm used to the beach. What am I going to see any more of that for? And when I was in Florida, when I've been in California, like, I'm going to go show you the beach. I'm like, I know what a beach looks like, And so I get across to Switzerland, which is honestly one of the prettiest countries that I've ever been to, as well as Austria and Germany. Just that little section of the world there, it's just absolutely breathtaking. It's gorgeous, and they've got these really dramatic mountains and things like that. But after being there for a while, it's like I kind of miss the water. Which was something I wasn't expecting to say. So I ended up going to the French Riviera and down to Monaco to kind of have a look at some water because I missed it because I was so used to seeing it and I kind of just missed it.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, if somebody was coming to Australia, and of course we don't know when travel is going to come back, but if somebody was to come to Australia as one that has lived there for a while, what would you say is the number one thing that folks should go see? I know I've heard about the Sydney Opera and a couple of other things, but if somebody was coming to visit Australia and they don't want to get caught up in the tourism traps, again, every country has tourism traps, but if you were going to recommend some things that folks should go see if they were visiting Australia?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you come to Sydney, and especially if you're on a budget, you can actually get a ticket called a day tripper. And you can actually, like, for $50, I think it's $50, it's been ages since I've been on public transport, but you can get like a weekly pass. And that gives you unlimited access to the trains, buses, and ferries. And I would really highly recommend catching the ferries because you actually go through Sydney Harbour. Okay. And like a daily ticket, I don't know what it costs, but I think it's like $10 or $15 or something. And if you've got a family, you get like a family pass for $30 or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not expensive, right? And you can actually go, say, from Sydney to North Sydney and stuff like that. There's a little theme park called Luna Park that's on the other side of the water. So you can actually just duck around just the Sydney Harbour, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's a beautiful day out. You can actually go up to the zoo and catch the ferry across to go to the zoo. You're on the water, and I think that everybody who I've ever met who's a tourist loves just being in Sydney Harbour. And to be honest with you, I love being in Sydney Harbour. It's a beautiful harbour to be in, and there's still something special about, you look over to the side, there's the Opera House, and then you're like, I'm about to go underneath the Harbour Bridge. These are, some iconic things of Australia, so I definitely recommend seeing that.
Okay, that sounds like something I have to put on my to-do list because I know I've got a whole list of places that I wanted to visit. Australia was definitely one of them. I also wanted to visit the country that's on the other side of y'all, New Zealand. So I know those were on my wish lists along with some European countries and some South American countries. I don't know if you ever heard the story that I told on the network or everything, but I haven't done it lately, but I'm actually a Words with Friends person. So I played Words with Friends, and I was playing this woman that was like kicking my backside, to put it politely. And I was trying to figure out why she was kicking my backside because she was just like beating me left and right. And I found out she was a very attractive young lady, but also young. She was probably in her early 20s to maybe at the latest early 30s, but I think she was early to mid 20s. And I'm like thinking to myself, I've been in journalism. I've been involved in journalism. I've worked in different other kinds of fields. Why is this lady from New Zealand kicking my backside? And then we got to talking and chatting and everything in between the dialogue on Words with Friends. It turns out that she was the crosswords puzzle editor for one of the papers in New Zealand. So I knew I was doomed then because I was like, okay, now that makes sense why you're kicking my backside. Your job is to actually know these words and to actually create them in the crossword puzzle. So I didn't stand any chance. So if you, and I know you do like some gambling and stuff like that nature, Betty, if you had been Betty, you probably would have like made tons of money because I would have been the pigeon.
I will say about New Zealand, I travel to New Zealand quite frequently. COVID obviously has got in the way of that. I've got a lot of family in New Zealand. I definitely would say, if you're coming to Australia, a lot of people bypass my home state of Western Australia because it's a bit out of the way actually to get to. So I do understand, but if you get the chance, Western Australia is a beautiful place to visit. And if you're already in the Northern Territory where Ayers Rock is, you kind of should maybe duck over to Western Australia and have a bit of a look there because there's some equally beautiful things there. People talk a lot about the Great Barrier Reef. We also have one that's very similar to that called Ingaloo Reef outside of Western Australia. So a lot of beautiful sites to see over in WA. But if you've only really got time to do the East Coast and you just do, say, Queensland, Sydney, Melbourne, which I, again, would recommend all three of those, the flight from Brisbane, which is in Queensland, so that's north of Sydney, the flight from there to Auckland in New Zealand is 2.5 hours. It's actually quicker to get there than it is to get to Perth. So I definitely recommend popping over to New Zealand and having a look around there. There's some great sites there. And if you get the chance, definitely go down to South Island. Then maybe, depending on what airline you're flying with, if you're coming in from the States, you can actually take Fiji Airways out of New Zealand. You stop over in Fiji. It'll then stop you over in Hawaii and then bring you into LA, and you can sort of fly home from there. So if you've got a little bit of time up your sleeve, when you fly with some airlines, depending on how they route and where their hub country is, you often sort of get a free stopover, and you go, oh, look, I'm going to spend 2 days on the weekend or something in Fiji on my way home, and then I'll spend another day in Hawaii just having a good time, and then I'll get home. So, I think it's a fun way of being able to see the world when you can just have a look at what airlines fly where and where their hubs are, and that enables you to do a few extra things.
Oh yeah, that sounds like great. For those that are watching us and have seen you on the network but may not know all that much about Australia and everything, what is like the racial ethnic makeup of Australia? Because when I think of Australia, of course, I think of the English folks that kind of like came over and was kind of the same kind of creation as the U.S. So it was like the English folks that were escaping persecution. Some folks would say that they were prisoners, whatever the model is. But then, of course, there's the ones that were natives there, the Aborigines. I imagine there's a decent Asian population, but I'm really not sure of the rest of the makeup of Australia.
Yeah, I mean, look, Australia is obviously predominantly a Caucasian or a white country, but we do have a lot of multiculturalism here. So yes, obviously there is a lot of Asian people here because of the proximity that we have, but we also have a lot of Pacific Islanders, and that really includes me, even though I'm not actually a Pacific Islander by blood. My family actually come from Fiji, so we're Indian by blood, but they've been in Fiji for many generations. And so they actually, my uncle got a scholarship over to Australia, and then my mother came over when she was 18 to Australia. So it is a bit of a mixed bag of ethnicities. I think we've got people from all over the world here, and so there is a lot of different cultures here. There's a lot of big communities. There's a big Italian and big Greek community, and there's a big community for just about everybody. I think has a big community here. So.
Cool. And I did watch a little bit of the finance show, and I saw that Nick was still trying to buy your country because he keeps trying to buy everybody's country. I don't know what's up with that, but Nick keeps trying to buy everybody. He wanted Greenland. He wanted Australia. He just wants everybody's country.
Yeah, well, Australia would be a strategic purchase. I'm not sure how the UK will feel about that, though. We are still technically part of the Commonwealth. So I'm not sure how well he will go with that, but yeah, look, I think that Australia stands pretty well. I mean, we've done very well, and a lot of people, when they look at our economy, they're like, how come Australia just is so lucky? Like nothing ever happens to them. Like with the Great Recession, Australians, if you ask an 18-year-old kid today, like, what was the Great Recession like? If they lived in Australia, they'd be like, what Great Recession? What happened? Because we didn't see it here. We really didn't. We actually boomed during that period of time. And a big part of the reason for that is that we export a lot of minerals. So we have a very, very established mining sector. We export iron ore, we export diamonds, we export gold. We actually have some oil here in Australia. And we also have a very significant agricultural sector. So we have big, massive farmland, and they have cows and sheep. They have wheat, all of those sorts of things. So our exports are a very, very important part of our economy. And that helps us to weather the storm when, for example, tourism goes down. There's a lot of countries that I'll be very worried for because they're so heavily reliant on tourism, for example, and when people aren't traveling, what's going to happen? So
yeah, that's real true. A lot of folks will be trying to figure out what's going to go on with that, but since y'all are in a better situation, because that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask you is, I know that you're into investment, and I was trying to figure out what the main industries are in the different primary centers of Australia, because I know like here in the Triangle area of North Carolina, we're considered the Research Triangle Park because there are a number of science-oriented folks, and it's also Durham is known as the city of medicine, and of course we've also got a rich cultural community here as well. But when I think of Australia, I couldn't think of like one particular industry. So, what is the main industry in Australia?
well, I think we've changed a bit, and I think now we're so heavily reliant on mining is probably one of the biggest ones, and agriculture, as I said before, because we're exporting so much, because our mining sector has taken off so much. There's a thing sort of called the Dutch effect. They kind of had the same thing. Our manufacturing sector has very much struggled because of it. So I think, tourism in Australia, it's a little bit shaky because Australia can be quite expensive compared to a lot of other countries. But we still do have without COVID, we still have a thriving tourism sector. And especially when the Australian dollar is relatively weak against the US or against the euro or against the British pound, we tend to see an influx of people coming in because it's cheap in their terms, as opposed to what it is for us. But I think tourism does play a big part. Certainly mining and agriculture plays a big part. We have some sort of banking sector here, but it's not as advanced as I think it could be. I think we could really make ourselves a financial hub if we wanted to, like Singapore has, but for some reason we haven't really gone down that path. But I think they're the main things that we really do, and the rest of the economy is sort of based on internal stuff, that building, housing, construction, building roads, all that kind of stuff. So
now, is there an active union scene there in Australia? Because I know right here in North Carolina we've been having Fight for 15 because folks want to raise our minimum wage, and there's a number of things like that throughout the United States. But I don't know whether there's like an active union community or an active push for minimum wages to be up in Australia, or do y'all have like a higher minimum wage that's much better than the United States?
We do have a minimum wage. I think the minimum wage, and I'm not an expert on this. I think there's a different minimum wage depending on what sector you're in. But I think you'd be pretty unlucky if you were only earning minimum wage. I mean, nobody's just on minimum wage unless you're sort of 18. You're working at McDonald's or something. And this is something to talk about minimum wages that people in America often they sort of get horrified when they hear this. If you're a 21-year-old manager at McDonald's, you're earning about $1,200 a week. So when I say that to Americans, they're like, what? I'm like, well, because you're going to get $25 an hour. You're going to get 9% in superannuation pay, which is our equivalent of your pension fund. So your employer pays that. You get sick pay, you get annual leave, all of that sort of stuff. You do overtime, you get time and a half and shift loading and all this sort of stuff. And so, there's not really, if you're working in this country, I think, unless you're making some really bad decisions, you're probably not going to be struggling. If you've got kids and stuff and you're trying to support yourself on one income, you've got kids and your other partner's not working or something like that, it might be a bit tougher. But our wages are a bit higher. I think we don't have it quite as bad as some other countries have got it. Yes, there is unions here. So we have two political parties. Most countries, I think, have a sort of two-party system. We have two major political parties. One's called the Labor Party, and the other party is called the Liberal Party. So this becomes quite confusing for international people because they hear somebody say, "Oh, you're a Liberal." Well, Liberals they're not conservatives, but there's a conservative wing of the Liberal Party, and so there's just differences between different countries. And I think Australia's centre-right party can actually look like quite a left party to some people from other parts of the world. But the Labor Party, yes, they do try to. They're mostly made up of union or ex-union people, and they do try to support workers. And there's sort of always that push and pull between improving workers' rights, increasing their wages, those sorts of things, and then big business saying, hey, if you increase the wages anymore and increase their benefits anymore, we're going to be uncompetitive internationally. And again, that was actually, I think, one of the things that affected our manufacturing sector, because this wasn't I'm not putting the blame on this on unions, but you can't pay someone $10 an hour when everybody else is earning $25 an hour. But on the same token, if you're paying everybody $25 an hour and you're trying to manufacture a motor vehicle, how are you going to be able to compete internationally and sell that motor vehicle? And so we've actually lost our motor vehicle industry here in Australia. We're not manufacturing any cars here anymore. So that's been quite sad. Those jobs have been displaced. But I think there'll be other industries that those people can find work and it can be picked up.
Yeah, sounds like they might find some other jobs. But you're right, that would be very confusing here because you told somebody anywhere in the United States that there was like labor and liberal, they would think that was like the Democrats and maybe like the Communist Workers Party, because that's what they would think of as being like labor. So they would think like maybe left and far left. They definitely wouldn't think left and right or left and middle. They'd be thinking when they heard those terms more like left and far left. So that's, yeah, down here that would be very confusing. When you visited LA and some of the other parts, I think you said you visited the East Coast as well. What were the parts of the United States that you loved or that you really enjoyed? Because I know you've traveled here, but I'm just curious as to what parts of this area you really fell in love with.
Look, we actually drove down from Vancouver. I actually drove down with my uncle on one of my trips, but this was a trip where I spent quite a lot of time. And we drove down. It was always my dream to get a 1959 Cadillac and drive across the United States. That hasn't happened yet, but the car rental place in Vancouver actually upgraded me into a Cadillac. And so I was like, well, I'm going to drive this around the United States on the wrong side of the road. It's going to be awesome. And so we drove down through Washington State, went to Seattle and everything, which I quite liked. Mind you, I did come through the winter. I then went down through Oregon, had a great time there. We drove through California, and of course, coming into California when you're driving, it's not the first thing you're going to see is going to be LA. The first thing you're going to see is the beautiful sort of countryside and that sort of stuff. We stopped at a place called Wairika. There was a Wairika and a Eureka, and there's a few other places up there. And so we popped in there, and I thought California was a really pretty place. I'm not actually a huge fan of LA or New York, not because there's anything wrong with them, but I just don't think big cities, are my thing. There's just too many people. I'm sort of pretty sure that there's this conspiracy in California that every time that I get there, every Californian is just going to come out and drive at the same time as I'm driving, because I have never experienced traffic like it. I'm like, how is this many people? Even coming out of San Francisco, I'm like, how is it this many people? But look, I love San Francisco. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I was too much of a fan of Sacramento. I was kind of like, oh, okay. LA was great. I think I prefer San Francisco, actually. It seemed a bit more quirky and a bit more fun. Yeah. I did enjoy LA. Vegas was a hoot. I absolutely adored Vegas. It was just a lot of fun. But I actually, on my next trip over to the United States, I then spent a bit more time in New York, and I spent a lot of time in the southern states. So I spent a lot of time in North Carolina. I spent a fair bit of time in Georgia. And I really enjoyed the southern states. I was a bit nervous going there because I'd heard all these sort of racial things and, you can't get in there. And I got there and it was nothing like, all the fears I had, but it was just nothing like that. The southern states are absolutely gorgeous. So I'd be hard pressed to pick a favorite, actually. I had a really great time pretty much everywhere I went. Just the traffic, I think, in New York and LA, I'm just not a fan of that bit, but everything else was really cool.
It sounds like it. I'm trying to think whether they sent like a memo that says Shaquille is coming. Let's all go out and drive our cars right now, because that's what it seems like you're thinking that they did, is they sent out a grand memo.
I'm sure they did. Surely there is just not that many people. I remember it was really funny, actually, because not funny, but like when I was driving out of LA to come back to Australia and COVID was happening, and the traffic was already relatively light, but because COVID had happened and there was the shelter-in-place orders, so I'm like cruising through with I was in a Chevrolet convertible, and I'm cruising through, getting back to the airport. I'm like, well, this is how it should be. There's like 10 lanes, and I'm the only car. This is excellent. But I remember when I first got there, going, how do you have 10 lanes in like both directions? Like, what's peak hour must be a dream. And of course, I got into peak hour a couple of times and just went, oh, like, no, this is not good. So just not used to it, I guess. Even like Sydney, for example, is our most populated city and our most populated state. And I think we've got like 8 million people, which isn't even the population of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big difference between us.
Oh yeah, big time difference. Because I'm trying to remember, does Australia drive on the same side of the road as the United States, and do they have those same speed limits that folks do in England? Because we always hear talk about the autobahn over there in Europe and everything. So are y'all like got a similar system of driving very fast, or is it more like the kind of speed limit that we've got here? And also, are y'all driving on the same side as we do?
We're definitely not driving on the same side as you guys. Well, if you're driving properly, you're not anyway. It was a bit funny because when I came back from the States, I was like, oh, hang on, what side of the road am I supposed to be on now? Because I've been over there for so long and I've been in Europe beforehand. And as far as speed limits are concerned, no, unfortunately, we have kilometers per hour, but yeah, unfortunately, our speed limits are pretty much the same as yours. And the autobahns are really only in Germany. So I made this mistake in Switzerland. I didn't know. And I was like, is this like an autobahn? He's like, yes, it's like a freeway. I'm like, okay, cool. So I floored it in this, we had this brand new Mercedes, and I floored it. And we've been traveling quite fast. And the Swiss guys are going, the speed limit's only 110 kilometers an hour. I'm like, yeah, but it's an autobahn. He's like, you're not in Germany. Slow down. I got away with that, thankfully. But yeah.
But it sounds like you got away with it. I know a friend of mine. This was many years ago when I was in college, but they drove from Milwaukee down to North Carolina, and we were all trying to get down to a football game. Well, most of them were. I was actually just wanting to visit family and friends. But I know we had to be breaking all kinds of speed records because we left, once it was in the evening so that we could get down to the game by noon or whatever family obligations you wanted to get to. And I remember that everybody broke the records, and it was like just, going through the different states, and we were just shattering speed records. But when we, no problem, didn't get caught, and then we all spent the weekend, did what we had to do, catching up with family. Those folks that went to the game. And then we turned around and we literally started the same process, speeding back. Of course, it was only like maybe half a mile outside of the town of Chapel Hill was when they pulled us over for speeding after we had done that the whole time going in. So they decided to catch us on the way going out. So I think it's that like kind of the rule of karma will get you. So the karma got us on the way back.
That was actually my parting gift from the great state of California. I don't think I've ever actually had a parking ticket ever, or at least not one that was my fault. And this time, I got a parking ticket, and I'm like, really? And then I tried to pay it, and it wouldn't accept my Australian credit card. I'm like, what am I going to do? I actually had to ring a few of my friends. I got back to Australia, like, can you pay my fine for me? Because I don't know how to pay it. And I ended up getting it sorted. I did pay it at the end, but that was fun. I got a parking ticket. I came to a country and broke laws already, so that's.
You've already broke laws in other countries. So you broke them there. You've broken them in different other. Well, yeah, because you said you broke the one in one of the European countries and the United States. It sounds like you might get your face on the poster in the post office after a while. So you're working on it.
See, at least at the time in Europe, it was okay because I was. I'm British, and so I was still part of the EU back then. So it was okay. I was allowed to be there. But the US, I'm a guest of your country, so I try and behave myself as much as I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said you like spending time in Las Vegas, so I'm thinking that your kid can't be behaving himself, but so much and everything. One of the things that's just fascinated me about you as I've been learning about you through IBM TV and everything is that you're relatively young and you've got this successful financial career. So what kind of advice, if somebody's watching the show now, there's one of my friends that might be younger, and like I said, I'm in my late 50s, but I've got friends of all age ranges. But what advice would you give to somebody to get into the financial field and be successful at a relatively young age? Because if I remember correctly, you're in like either your mid to late 30s, so that's relatively young for folks to be breaking out and being successful in that career.
Well, I'm 36, so I probably can't really give advice about that because my advice is don't do what I did, basically. I left working for one of Australia's larger financial institutions, financial companies, and I was an associate director, and I left that to go and set up a hedge fund by myself, and I'm like 27 years old. It was just like dumbass. Like, why would you do that? You know. So, and like we started off as like, you know, 3 or 4 guys with a couple of laptops and you know, hooked up to our TV screen and just trade the markets and just sort of trying to make a go of things. And just, you know, in amongst that journey, I happened to get really good at interest rate derivatives trading, which is just really boring. And I actually don't know why I'm good at that. Like, I could have been good at something else, but I just happened to become good at that, and it's quite a niche. So that's why I became more attractive. And then I got headhunted over to Switzerland after a good friend of mine showed my trading account to somebody in Switzerland, and I was like, "What'd you do that for?" Like, and he said, "Oh, you got to talk to these people." And I said, "I'm not talking to them. You know, I've heard all this stuff before, and I'll just be a day trader. I'll just trade my own account with my friends, and that'll be kind of it." You know, I'd sort of given up on the idea of becoming a hedge fund manager. And then, you know, over the last few years, when Switzerland, you know, kept hassling my business partner, said, "Can you get him on the phone to us?" And I eventually flew over there, and they gave me some opportunities that I didn't have here in Australia. And I thought, okay, there I go. But I think the finance industry today, depending on what you want to do, the finance industry today is not what people think it is on TV. You know, people see shows like Wolf of Wall Street and, you know, and even Wall Street itself, you know, the whole Gordon Gekko and it's, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's really not like that anymore. And even if you watch like the Big Short or that sort of stuff, you see a lot of these like really high paid kind of people just doing all this stuff and they're yelling down the phone, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, to some degree, you know, you might be trading large transactions against other banks and things on the phone, but it's really not like that. And when you get into finance, I think there's a sales side. So if you know, if you specialize in a particular type of financial product, you can go out and sell that to advisors and things like that. There's some money to be made. If you want to be on trading or you're on the trade desks, you tend to need to study things like mathematics and physics and those sorts of subjects, computer engineering and that type of stuff. But I'm not sure I could even recommend that today to somebody, because the quant space, which is where people use mathematical and statistical analysis to try and, you know, make their trades, that's a pretty full up space at the moment. You know, it's going to be really difficult to kind of get jobs there. And, you know, and also you may have heard a lot about high frequency trading and them trying to, you know, deliberately slow down network feeds and data feeds. And then you're going to front run people's orders and that kind of stuff. Look, again, you know, that was caused by some regulations, and some of those regulations have been rolled back, and there's a bit more openness in the market. So again, I don't really think that's going to be the way to get into finance today. I'm not really sure what it would be. But the one thing I would say, not just in a finance career, but just in life, is do something that you're going to enjoy. I know it sounds like a real cliche. I mean, I always hate it when I hear people who are at the top of their industry and they go, but it's not about the money. I'm like, you just sold a painting for $50 million. Please don't tell me it's not about the money. Of course it's about the money. Yeah. Right. So yes, it's about the money, of course. But a lot of it is about, you know, for me, it's like playing chess or something like that. It's like, how can I strategically work out how to make something extra that other people may not see, and just using life experience and your own skill set to kind of do that. So I say to people, you know, learn your craft, but do something that you enjoy. You know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm always shocked at the amount of folks that seem to be getting into, I guess it's the online day trading, because I know I'm oftentimes getting folks that are sending me emails or this or about that on a regular basis. I don't know anybody that's really made money on that. Maybe you do, but if that's an actual legitimate thing, please tell me it is, and I'll try to jump on it. But I'm sometimes wondering about it when I get these emails talking about like how that's the next great way to make money is these online day trading tools. Do you think that actually works?
You can day trade, you can, but you have to be really good at it and really experienced at it. I guess this would be a better answer. If I asked you, can I go and make money out of being, you know, a football player?
Right.
Like, yeah, you could, but you've got to be really good at it. Like, otherwise you're just going to be just an everyday person, right? So, you know, I think the statistics are something like 97% of traders fail. And there's many reasons for that I won't bore the audience with, but, you know, I think that's about the rates, 97%. Now, outside of the United States, there's a fairly big thing called a contract for difference, a CFD. So you don't have to actually buy the shares; you can just trade CFDs, and they're quite heavily leveraged. And there's been some controversy about these because a lot of these providers, instead of them putting your trade into the market, they just take the other side because they know that 97% of people are going to lose their money. The same as bookmakers. They know that most people eventually are going to lose their money.
Right.
So I think a lot of people get a little bit caught up, and one of the things that can go really wrong, it might sound counterintuitive, but one of the things that can go really badly wrong is that people make money too early. And they think, I started with a $10,000 account. Now I've got 15,000. I'm a genius. And they start placing ever larger trades, and eventually one goes wrong and they blow up their account. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I didn't just become a really successful trader by never having made a mistake. I have gambled it all and lost it all a few times. Well, thankfully for me, I was so young it didn't really matter. And losing it all was like $2,000. Like it didn't, it was like a week's pay. That's all I'd saved up. It wasn't a big deal. But when you try to do that to replace your income, you certainly do need to be a lot more careful, I think. I know a lot of people today are probably looking at this as a way to bring income in while the coronavirus is on. And it's like, okay, if you're going to do this, do it very, very carefully. Like really pay attention to what you're doing and take the time to understand it. Don't go for these exotic things that you don't understand. Just stick to something that's really simple that you can understand, and then trade those sorts of things and start there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one of the things that also shocked me, but it has nothing to do necessarily with trading, was how some of the bank industries have like some age restrictions, which I guess made sense in the early days when bankers probably retired at like a certain age and everything. But I know my mom actually sat on the board of a small bank here in North Carolina. And I remember when she joined the board, they pretty much told her that she had to be off the board a few years after she joined, because that's when she hit, I want to say it was like around 70. So at 70, they were like, nope, you got to go off the board. So I was shocked when I learned that, because she's almost a decade older than that now. But at the time, I was like, you're still going to be very much having all your faculties with you well into your 80s and 90s. And I would even argue that has been the case. So like I said, I personally think that she could still be doing that kind of work on the board, but I know they had those age restrictions. So I don't know whether you've seen that on the opposite side, or even on other markets where they try to like have age restrictions because of wanting to stop people being involved in the banking industry and say 65 or 70 in other parts of the world, or is that just a United States trend?
Well, I can't say about it as far as being on boards, but certainly as a trader, if I was running one of the world's big banks and I wanted a trader, I wouldn't give myself a job. I'll tell you now, because I would consider myself too old, depending on what the trader was doing. But if they're doing the high-paced, fast stuff, then you really don't want them to be doing that much past sort of 35, 40 tops, because it burns them out. And, even for me, which, people often sit there and say, oh, how do you do the hours that you do? When I first started off in trading, I was working out of Sydney. So you were doing the US markets. I'm doing the New York shift, which is the equivalent of the graveyard shift for us. So I'm starting work at like 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'm finishing at 6 or 7 or 8, or depends on daylight savings. I might finish at 9 in the morning and that sort of stuff. And if you're doing that, it really does affect the rest of your life. Right. But then you still have to actually, you still live in Australia, so you're on the opposite time zone. So you're still going to get phone calls and people knocking on the door and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of traders, especially when there's really volatile times, are going to be sitting in their office and they're just working basically across all the different time zones and all the different economies, the Australian markets, the Asian markets, the European markets, and the US, and it just goes through a cycle again. And you can't do that forever and have a life. Right. Most people, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think most people would like to find a life partner, maybe have some children, start a family and things like that. And you can't do that if you're working 100 hours a week at the office.
Wow, that's a lot of hours. Yeah, I can't even fathom that. But I've read the books from bankers and other folks. So I do know that that's about the hours that bankers and sometimes lawyers and other folks work. But when you put it that kind of way, that's 100 hours in a day, and some folks are upset when they're doing 40. So y'all are really working almost 2.5 of the average person's work week in 1 week. So that's just amazing that y'all would even put that on. Um, Shaquille, just out of curiosity, if you weren't doing finance, what would be Shaquille's dream job? So, like I said, if you had a dream job and you weren't doing finance in the world, what would Shaquille's dream job be?
I think, well, I used to say I'd love to be a pilot because I love to travel around the world, but I think first class is a bit more comfortable than the cockpit, so I've gone off that idea. To be perfectly honest with you, if I could have gone into like medicine or medical research and that sort of stuff, I think that would be where I'd love to be. My family are in medicine, so I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to be a rebel. I'm not going to go into medicine. I'm going to do something else. So that was really the reason why I didn't go into it. But I am very interested, and I love to see some of the advancements that we have in medicine, and just some of the things that we understand that we didn't understand before. You know, we've mapped the human genome now. We know what DNA is like. We know how to, you know, there's some experimental stuff that they're doing with genomics, so nutrigenomics, pharmacogenomics, and things like that, where they're trying to see whether the things that you eat might affect the expression of your genes at a DNA level. I'll say that again. It might change your expression of DNA at a gene level. So there's a lot of advancements and things like that are coming along, and you know we should be able to, you know, keep advancing and make people healthier and find new drugs to treat, you know, various things. So that's where I would be if I couldn't be doing finance.
Gotcha. You're gonna have to go back and watch the show that Tish did on the network last Saturday because she had a guest that was actually talking about exactly that, Ludi, and I can't think of Ludi's last name, but she's originally from France and now lives here in the States. But she's doing work around the genes that you're talking about and how the genes impact the diet. So her company is called Healthy with Ludi, but she was definitely featured on Tish's Plant a Seeds program. So you have to go back and catch that back issue because she's got all kinds of amazing thoughts on that and has done some serious research. So she was an amazing guest. That's one of the shows. In addition to this one, I produced a few shows for us, meaning the IBM Network, and that's one that I was on the backside, just kind of watching what the interview was, and it was very engaging, that conversation. So if that's an interest of yours, you should definitely go check that out. Well, it was quite
I'll
interesting.
definitely try and catch that.
Yeah. You should definitely do that. Well, we're getting ready to wrap everything up. Thanks a lot for popping in, Shaquille. I wanted to get ready to do my other show because I got one other show for here, and then I've got my podcast that I do that's unfortunately not on the network because it's just the more traditional podcast form. So me and my buddy Dean do that in the evening. So speaking of crazy hours, Monday is my crazy day because I do media for, if they pop me in as a guest on IBM, it can sometimes be 10 hours, but at the very minimum, it's 8 hours straight of different forms of entertainment and communication in this podcast format. So Monday is my crazy day in terms of that kind of activity. So definitely want to thank you for popping in. We shared a little bit of music earlier, and definitely I think folks got to know more about you. I definitely did. So appreciate you popping in and sharing a little insight about Australia with me.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Yep. Thanks. Cool. All right, like I said, that was Shaquille. He popped in. He's one of our regulars here on IBM.TV, and definitely always has some great things to say and some great wisdom to share. So that was great learning more and more about what Shaquille is all about. So definitely we learned a lot and had a great bit of the conversation. So get ready to wrap up the show. And as I get ready to wrap up the show, then I will give you all a little bit of music as I did earlier. We were on a whole Bobby Hinton theme, so I may just keep that Bobby Hinton theme going right along, and then I might come back with a little bit of news information as well, and then from there we'll wrap everything up along that nature. So I think that y'all will have had a good show on this particular edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. So definitely, I know a lot of folks are very much familiar with the great sounds, and I've been mentioning Bobby and everything. So I think we'll give y'all his rendition of "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay." So that is definitely a classic song, and I'm gonna make not make the mistake this time of playing something that I don't want to play because I did that earlier. So we're just going to skip that one. And we're going to get to hearing a little bit of Bobby Hinton. And then I might come back with a little bit of news information as well. So definitely want to thank everybody for joining us and enjoying the conversation. So that being said, we're going to put on a little bit of Bobby Hinton's version of Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. So that's what we're going to give y'all right now. And then we'll come back with maybe a little bit more of news information. But right now, let's check out Bobby Hinton and Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the even comes, watching the ships roll in. Then I watch them come back again. Oh, I'm just a sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. I have nothing to live for, look like nothing gonna come my way. Oh, I'm just a sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Oh yeah, sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing gonna change. Everything remains the same. I can't do what 10 people want me to, so I guess I'll remain the same. Hey. If you rest in my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Oh, I'm just a sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing gonna change. Everything remains the same. I can't do what 10 people want me to, so I guess I'll remain the same. Yeah. Sitting you rest in my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Oh, I'm just a sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I gotta sit here, keep on waiting right here. Sometimes I feel like I'm wasting time, but I know what I have to do, y'all. I gotta sit here, sit right here on this dark, lonely dock, wasting time. I know I'm wasting time, but I gotta sit right here. Oh yeah.
Ever since we were little girls, you've compared us to each other.
All right, folks. Definitely some more great music from none other than Bobby Hinton. It was great hearing Bobby Hinton give us those great sounds and all of that. So definitely hope that y'all enjoyed that. And by the way, I just realized as I was looking at the news that Amazon is one step closer to widespread drone delivery because federal authorities have greenlit its flight of Prime Air drones for commercial use. So apparently, the Federal Aviation Administration announced today that it has cleared Amazon Prime Air as an air carrier, allowing the online retail giant to begin a trial run of its commercial drone delivery program. Bloomberg and other media outlets have reported. So apparently, we'll be getting our packages via drone very shortly. On August 29th, the FAA issued Amazon Prime Air a Part 135 air carrier certificate using unmanned aircraft systems, the FAA said in a statement provided to GeekWire. And they definitely going to be doing that more and more. So it says that Amazon told a network that it isn't ready to immediately deploy package deliveries at scale, and that it must clear some imposing regulatory and technical hurdles before small packages holding the likes of cat food or toothpaste can routinely be dropped at people's homes. So still, the FAA clearance marks an important step forward for Prime Air. So looks like we might have to wait a while, but they've cleared at least one major hurdle in order for that to be happening by that particular service and everything. So it does look like a lot of companies. I see that there's another company that was also doing that as well. So it definitely looks like folks may be looking at very shortly having some sort of packages coming that way. And by the way, the last full moon of this particular summer is also getting ready to come up this week as well. That's right. That's going to be happening this week. And you can see it shining right next to Mars. That's right. It might be shining right next to Mars. A full corn moon. That's what they call it, a corn moon. It will light up the sky at 1:22 a.m. on Wednesday, September 2nd on the East Coast, according to that trusty thing of knowing about the weather, that being the Farmer's Almanac. When the full moon closest to the autumnal equinox, known as the harvest moon, happens in October, September's full moon becomes the corn moon. That's what the Farmer's Almanac has reported. So it's the third and final full moon of the summer in the northern hemisphere. To the naked eye, it will take full for 2 or 3 days. Earth Sky has reported. The best way to see it is to get a view of a clear eastern horizon at dusk to see the orangey full moon. Forbes has reported that on Thursday, the moon will look like it's close to Mars in the east right after dark, according to some sources. These next several nights, September 4th, 5th, and 6th, let the moon introduce you to the red planet Mars, Earth Sky reported. Next month in October 2020, Mars will supplant Jupiter as the sky's fourth brightest heavenly body. So definitely looks like we're going to see some things that should be very interesting, and that folks that like to look at the stars and look at the moon and things along that line will pay attention to. I know I'm one that definitely pays attention to a lot of things that are going on in space, whether that's the moon, whether that's the stars. And of course, as many of you know that follow this show, I do like to pay attention to Mother Nature as well. So that's one of the things that's going on. And I also see that we got some statistics from the CDC about things as well. So let's see what they've got to say. It's a statistic from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention about coronavirus deaths in the United States has sparked a wave of confusion on social media. COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus, was the only cause mentioned on death certificates in 6% of deaths involving the virus, the CDC said last week. So some people mistakenly took that to mean that the remaining 94% of coronavirus related deaths were caused by other underlying health conditions and not COVID-19. The misconception went viral on social media. That's right, we got to watch out what social media says. Twitter removed a tweet on Sunday that promoted the false interpretation of the CDC's data, which unfortunately that person in 1600 shared to his 85.6 million followers, media outlets reported. What the CDC's update really means is that 94% of the people who died from the coronavirus had at least one other health condition in addition to COVID-19 that could have contributed to their passing. Not that the additional factor was the sole reason for it. In fact, the CDC mentions that for deaths with conditions or causes in addition to COVID-19, on average, there were 2.6 additional conditions or causes per death. This aligns with what the agency has been saying all along. So definitely folks are needing to be still concerned about what's going on and not taking it lightly. We definitely still need to wear our masks. We definitely need to still do social distancing and all of that. People over the age of 65 and those with underlying medical conditions such as diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and respiratory issues have a higher risk of severe COVID-19 and deaths from it. So that might be some of the group that has been targeted more, but that does not mean that we need to stop paying attention or stop being cautious in the way that we are treating society and life. So definitely, we do know that social media can have a impact on people's interpretation. So definitely, that was interesting that that came out this particular news story, and there's further details about it. But I'm one that believes in definitely in science and definitely believes in the institution of science and the ways that we can learn and things of that nature. And a lot of folks are telling us that we need to still be cautious in the ways that we handle life and things of that nature. So I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm going to continue to follow the rules that have been established, which is wearing that mask, definitely continuing with social distancing and some other things along that line. So that's my attitude toward that. And that's what I'm going to continue to do also. So definitely, I think that that's the best advice is for us to continue following the advice of those in government jobs and government places. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And that's what I will continue to do. But right now, I'm getting ready to put on the ambassador. That will wrap up this particular edition of this show. And then, of course, I will also bring up a little bit about IBM.TV. And of course, we'll come back with maybe letting you check out as the total outro our video about this show. And you do know we've always got exciting guests and exciting conversation between the hours of 2 and 3:30. Sometimes it goes a little bit over right here on the radio show with Mark Lee. So that being said, I'm going to bring up the ambassador, and the ambassador will share with us what she's got to say. And then after the ambassador shares what she's got to do in terms of giving us those strong things in terms of how we should handle life, then we will bring up the thing about the IBM TV network, and then we'll close it out with the whole video about this show. So definitely mark it down on your calendar. Mondays at 2 o'clock, the radio show with Mark Lee.
कोरोना वायरस से कैसे बचेंगे? ये हैंड होकर और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे अच्छू अच्छू और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का।